abandoning unskillful thinking goes a long way to create a sense of happiness within ourselves. Our mind is the ultimate tool. You tell somebody this is the way you should be, but you don't give them a path to get there. That creates even more stress. When wealth transitions to the next generation, it creates a tremendous amount of stress. There's a sense of loss of identity. We have the firm belief that what we do helps people.
Hello and welcome to the Success Differently podcast. My name is Michelle Sorgaroli and I'm your host today, and we're being joined by our special guest, Bernie Geiss. Bernie is the founder, co-owner, and advisor of Cove Continuity Advisors. Now, his role, or his passion, if you will, for insurance actually started in 1987 when Bernie had the realization that he enjoyed helping people around difficult topics that felt real and meaningful to him. But by 1990, just a few years later, Bernie realized that he wanted to do things a little differently. He wasn't getting the fulfillment and he wasn't able to serve clients in the way that he wanted. So that's when he founded Cove. And Cove at the time was founded to become an activator of change and transformation. And he wanted to create a space to breathe by doing insurance right when the unimaginable strikes. In his spare time, Bernie can be found doing mountain biking. He is an ultra trail runner. I almost said marathon, Bernie. You can correct me on that if I'm wrong. And he's a mindfulness and meditation practitioner and an absolute delight and a warm and generous spirit. And I'm so excited about the conversation we're about to have. Thank you for joining us today, Bernie.
Well, thank you, Michelle. It's an absolute pleasure being here.
Isn't this just a treat? All righty. So space to breathe. This is, space to breathe in everything we do. It's right there in your background. It's probably a good place to start. From 1987, you were already thinking about mindful business and mindful service and real and meaningful topics. What is space to breathe? Do you want to share a little bit about that with us?
Well, let me go way back. So many, many, many years ago, I discovered meditation, and meditation helped me overcome an injury and to deal with pain. And the interesting thing is that the focus is on our breath.
Yeah.
And focusing on our breath literally is a way to get to a place where pain doesn't touch you in terms of your mind. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. And then I started thinking about, well, what is space to breathe for the rest of my life in terms of activities, etc. And thought, okay, space to breathe is any place that I can go, either physically or mentally, where I don't feel stress. And so that became the underpinning of a search that lasted for many, many years to find out more about that. And that led me around the world several times and meeting some very interesting people.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that space to breathe, you said stress and relief from both mind and body, right? Just relief from all of it.
Yes.
Your travels around the world, how did that impact who you became and how you found insurance and then moved into where you are today?
So I went on a quest, as cheesy as that might sound, but I did read Lord of the Rings a long time ago. Um, and I did read a series called by David Eddings, which I absolutely loved. Um, but I knew that in order for me to be really effective in life and to really get something, uh, find a purpose in life, I
Mm.
needed to find out what made me tick. And so I set off on an adventure and I traveled to find teachers who could provide me with guidance in terms of developing specifically meditation. And so that took me that took me to Australia, to New Zealand, to Southeast Asia, to India. And I dedicated a significant amount of my time to doing that. But I also realized that one of the things that creates space to breathe is just the freedom to be able to do whatever I want. And with that desire to do whatever you want, in other words, not be, to have a boss, to have
Mm.
people tell me what to do,
Mm-hmm.
you need financial freedom
Mm.
in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided that not only would I continue my quest to develop my mind in order to become a better person and to
Mm-hmm.
live a better life, but I thought, okay, in order to really do that, I needed to have some independence financially, and that drew me into the insurance world. At the time, I was looking at becoming an investment advisor, a real estate agent, or an insurance advisor. And it was in 1987, and the stock market crash took place. The real estate market was having a little bit of
Such
trouble.
a great time to start.
And I thought, okay, well, what's this? What's life insurance about? Because part of the learnings or teachings that I delved into was about facing, what we all fear the most, which is death. And, we deal with it in different ways. But I realized that the financial resources that I could gather from working provided me a certain amount of freedom on a
Mm,
physical level. Um, and it was very helpful to have that in order to develop the freedom and the knowledge on a mental level. So uh, I thought about life insurance and I thought, well, this would be talking to people about death and dying. And I felt
mm,
that I was qualified to do that from a philosophical perspective. And I thought, wow, so I could provide a service to people uh, to provide them with space to breathe on the financial level in the event of a catastrophic event, i.e., a death, and
mm,
then or a disability or a critical illness. But also, there's there's the there's the space to breathe the that happens when a person receives a life insurance benefit because a loved one passed away. But there's also the space to breathe that's simply owning something that gives you the comfort that
mm,
you're taking care of loved ones in the event that something happens to you, or taking care of yourself in the event of a disability.
mhm.
Like, there's a lot of stress if you become disabled and you can't work
Yeah,
from a financial perspective, let alone dealing with a disability. So I thought this was a perfect fit. Uh, and that's when I decided, okay, well, I'm going to go and try and become an insurance advisor.
that's awesome. Yeah, and I think you nailed it in terms of it's being a perfect fit. There's, you talked about teachers for guidance and how that impacted you, the learnings that you had, particularly around death. I'd love to just, can we come back to that?
Yes, absolutely.
Philosophically,
Yes,
I'd love for you to share philosophically, what were some of the teachings and learnings that really impacted you and have informed who you've become and who you are today?
absolutely.
So tell us about, is there a philosophy, when you say philosophically you're prepared to talk about that, what are some of your feelings around this difficult topic of death and passing?
Okay, so if
We go
if you're
really
going to run
deep.
a if you're going to run a marathon, and you want to be successful and you want to feel like you gave it your best shot, typically you train. So you go out and you run in the morning, you run in the evening, you set a schedule, you have a training program. And so comes time to run the marathon, well, your legs are in shape, your lungs are in shape, your heart's in shape, and you
Mm-hmm.
go out and you can succeed in running a marathon, which
Mm-hmm.
is not an easy feat for the average Joe or Jane, whichever way you want to look at it. So um, then there is the idea that if you want to become good at um, a skill, you want to become a musician. Well, it requires practice. And initially, there's probably a lot of frustration or failure because your fingers don't work. I can speak from experience. I've tried to pick up the guitar on several occasions, but I can't make my fingers and my brain connect
Oh,
at the same time all
mm-hmm.
that well. I'm sure that if I really dedicated some time to it, I could do it,
Mm,
but I don't have the passion for it.
mm-hmm.
And so
Interesting.
people who have a passion um, will pursue something and they understand what it takes to become proficient. So, but when it comes to death and dying and illness, um, people do not practice how to think about those topics. And what ends up happening is we shovel it out of our minds. We distract ourselves with all kinds of things
Mhm.
with the idea that they're going to give us some sense of fulfillment or satisfaction, when in fact, there is a lot of avoidance going on, and a lot of avoidance in dealing with this stress that arises in our mind when we think about something negative happening in our lives. So the meditation practice that I've studied and that I practice is really about um, focusing on our breath
Mm.
and allowing the thoughts that come up to be in full view and actually deciding, okay, this is a positive thought, this is a skillful thought, this is an unskillful thought, and making a conscious effort to actually drop the unskillful thinking and adopt the skillful thinking. And one of the unskillful things is thinking, one of the unskillful things to think is thinking that we're going to find happiness in some object or some um, way of living outside of, our own minds and our own body, i.e., the cars, the
Mm.
boats, anything. Whereas a skillful thought is that um, why don't I look at that desire that I have uh, to follow that passion or that desire
Mhm.
to acquire something, and look at the root of that and see whether or not it really is going to provide me with the happiness that I want. And so it's the process of looking at that and then eventually, hopefully, comprehending um, what does cause us stress in life and being able to abandon its cause and find a place through the use of our mind, through the training of our mind, that is a source of happiness and a source of peace. And so that quest in itself develops a muscle, a mental muscle,
Mm.
so that when difficulties do arise, you look at them from a different perspective. There's objectivity there. There's also the sense that this isn't personal. I was just
Mm.
having a conversation with a dear friend today whose uh, parents are having a very difficult time health-wise.
Mm.
And there is a tendency to think that this is unusual. This is not normal. And so then there's a panic that sets in, and then there's a fear that sets in when something happens to our body or our minds or
Mhm.
mind or body of somebody that's near and dear to us. But in fact, and coming to the point or to directly answer your question is that I've been a follower of the Buddhist teachings for many, many years. And one of the things that he stressed is that old age, illness, and death is normal.
Mm.
It's not as if anybody escapes it. And
Mhm.
so therefore, treat it as normal and therefore don't take it personally, because we do have a tendency to say, oh, this is happening to me and it doesn't happen to anyone else. Well, that
Mhm.
thinking is part of the cause of the problem. So um, observing and developing skills to be able to recognize skillful thinking, unskillful thinking, cultivating skillful thinking, and abandoning unskillful thinking goes a long way to create a sense of happiness within ourselves so that we can endure all of the things that the world throws at us.
Right.
How's that for a
It's
easy synopsis?
it's beautifully said, very articulate, as I would have expected. Um, you've used the word skillful many times,
Yes.
and I would love to just have you share when you're speaking to skillful, what are you really speaking to there? What does that word represent?
Skillful, like if you get down to the essence of it, skillful actions are those that lead to long-term happiness, and unskillful actions are those that lead to suffering and pain. And that's a
Oh.
really broad definition of what it is. But if you examine every thought, every action in those lights, you start to be able to choose, well, which ones bring me happiness and which ones bring me pain and suffering.
Mm.
And at that point, um, if you can become skillful at making that observation, you can become skillful
Right.
at choosing the options that will serve you the best. Skill represents, an ability, a proficiency to do something in the same way that
Yeah.
an archer develops the skill of archery. So it's action.
Right.
Um, it's positive action versus negative action. So
Hmm.
the terminology I like, and I didn't invent it by any stretch of the imagination, is that skillful represents the ability to develop something. You develop a skill, and unskillful is something that you can choose not to develop or drop or
Hmm.
abandon.
Hmm. So interesting, this idea of skillful thinking. You're really speaking to when we have skill and we develop our skill. Um, I would imagine most of us are developing skills to create positive outcomes or a good result or something. So there's a positive thing on the other side that we're aiming
Yes.
for and striving for. So interestingly, when we think about skillful thinking, you're essentially talking, um, what I'm hearing is that the brain is a tool,
Yes.
right? It's a tool that we can develop and train and hone to create more positive outcomes, ultimately happiness and freedom is what I'm hearing. Is that accurate?
Yes, correct. And our mind is the ultimate tool.
Yeah.
And so if we can develop the skillful use of that tool, then we can really figure out what
Mm.
actions we can undertake that will bring a positive outcome. So it's the skill at the root of all other skills.
There you go. The skill. Well, you spoke to skill, training and practice. And the other one you said was passion. And I thought it was very interesting how you nuanced here with speaking about the guitar, you didn't have a passion for it. Yes, you could have learned with a lot of training and practice and commitment to the craft, if you will. But without the passion, it doesn't have the same energy behind it, does it?
Absolutely. And passion is an interesting word. It can be used as the justification for engaging in some activity, but the passion doesn't determine whether or not that's a skillful or unskillful activity.
Mm,
So I could say I don't have the passion because I don't believe that developing that skill will ultimately bring me any lasting sense of happiness.
mhm.
So therefore, the passion disappears. So on the other hand, passion is desire. And if I can develop the desire to find a true lasting happiness, um, I can use that same passion to develop skills, which will lead to long-term happiness.
Exactly. So if we go, I want to take you right back now to when Cove was first founded in
Yes,
1990,
yes,
and passion for, at that time, as I understand it, your passion was really for creating something different that was serving people around this concept of space to breathe. Is that accurate?
yes, absolutely. Because I needed to earn money, but I wanted to do it in such a way that I would feel good about, the
Mhm.
service that I'm delivering. And I found that um, that desire was not necessarily shared by the industry that I work in.
Mm.
Um, and I wanted to differentiate myself by focusing on the impact that good insurance planning can have on people's lives.
Mm.
I felt that if I delivered excellent service and excellent products, then the financial side would take care of itself. It wasn't, it was not the ultimate objective. It was a hopeful byproduct of doing a job really well to
It being the
providing
financial
excellence.
reward, right? Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes,
Hmm.
yes. So, and it's interesting because the motivation that you think about, the reason why you do something has a big impact on how you do it. It has a big impact on the skills that you'll develop in order to be successful. So when I made that decision, I found myself having to forge a, a unique or independent path to satisfy my desire to live a life that aligned with the values that I had about conduct, about behavior, about
Mhm.
honesty, integrity. I had to align that with the skills that are required to be proficient
Mhm.
at you know, the delivery of a product and service.
Mhm.
So yeah, it was an exciting and interesting time. And
Absolutely.
in the same way that I started out uh, to develop or find a profession that would allow me financial freedom, everybody will probably understand this, but the less financial freedom you have, the less risk you're willing to take in order to do things differently because of the fear of failure
Mm.
and the potential um, lack of financial reward and therefore the additional stress of having to meet, the normal needs of daily living and
Mhm.
pay the bills and things like that. So what I found exciting was as I developed my skills in the insurance space, as I became more proficient and I earned more money, I was able to focus more and more on doing things the way I wanted to do them and take the risks that I
Mm.
felt I needed to take in order to test my theories, to
Mhm.
test my approach.
Absolutely. That's so true. So, looking back to then and looking forward to now, what could you have imagined then that Cove would look like it looks today, 30 some odd years later?
Well, no, I couldn't because I never met Michelle Sorgaroli until 2013. And so even with my level of commitment and desire to do things differently, I
Mm.
still found myself doing things in a very similar way that everybody else does things. And in the same way that I have always valued teachers.
Mm.
Um, you can meditate on a hillside in a cave, um, but you need human interaction in order to really develop. There's nothing better than having a live teacher to interact with,
Mm.
to be an example, to ask questions of, and in order to provide feedback and to provide learnings. So it wasn't until you and I met that I started thinking, okay, yes, I'm working in this little sandbox within my industry, but I really wanted um, to do things differently, and I wanted to take more risk. Uh, but it's not always easy doing it on your own. So
Mhm.
the working with a coach, I advise, I'd done it for many years, even before you and I met, and I valued it. But what it does is it gave me a kind of a license to explore those parts
Right.
of myself and the way I want to do business without without fear.
Mm.
Um, and that actually was really great because I'd reached a certain amount of financial success, but I really did get bored because it felt like I was straying from my desire to do things really differently. And so that progression developed over the years. And so to answer your question, did I imagine being where I am today back then? No,
Mm.
because I didn't know what the possibilities were.
Oh.
And I didn't know, um, you know, exactly how far I could go. And also, I want to just distinguish is that there's goals that we set for ourselves financially, but there's also goals that we set in terms of lifestyle, behavior, um, uh, a vision of how we want to show up in the world,
Right.
and they are not mutually exclusive, but at times one or the other can be more prominent than the other.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so as my life progressed in the professional world, I started to feel that I could pursue the non-monetary side of my profession coming back to that sense of not having the fear.
Hmm.
But you can't imagine being fearless when you have fear.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like it's like telling somebody, don't be afraid.
Hmm.
What does that mean? Like
Yeah,
when you tell
exactly.
somebody not to be afraid.
Yeah.
Um, it's different if you say to somebody, look, take a breath, just sit and watch what's going on.
Hmm.
That might reduce the fear, the stress, but it's providing people with instruction on how to do it,
Hmm.
not about telling them what needs to happen.
Hmm.
Because if you tell somebody this is the way you should be, but you don't give them a path to get there, that creates even more stress.
Right. Well, that's really speaking to, to your point, um, taking risks and not feeling comfortable with what's on the other side can be really tricky, can be really challenging. And if we don't
Yes.
know what's on the other side, that risk, the willingness and the ability to take the risk, it can be it can be within us, but we benefit from having someone support the journey, right? And this is coming back to you and your work with what you do now. You've developed, you talked about a path forward. And you've got, is it the eightfold path that you follow? And you've got a commitment to the seventh generation plan. So and as we look at these different models in your business, Bernie, what do you think has changed? We did our work together around differentiating whatnot. What changed specifically for you that allowed you to serve clients even more effectively as a result of the risks that you took and the discoveries you had?
Okay, so just one little correction. The Eightfold Path is a teaching of the Buddha.
Mm-hmm.
We have what we call the right way path.
The right way path.
There it is. Um, and so one of the things that really helped in this process was trying to depersonalize my journey. And what I mean by that is that if I were to if I were to be hit by the proverbial bus tomorrow, would everything that I've worked towards building, would it continue without me? And the answer was no.
Right.
So when you think about the work that we did together and the work that we continue to do now, was how do we take this process, this philosophy, and how do we build build it into something that's enduring? And therefore, that gives rise to this idea of the seven generation plan. And that allows us to start thinking, okay, what are the building blocks that have to be in place so that what we do, how we do it, and our brand can survive seven generations, which is a very long time, which means no longer it's about Bernie or the people that are in the company now,
Right.
but it's about building an entity that embodies or encapsulates the positive and skillful thinking and actions that I have felt and that we have felt are important to deliver space to breathe. So it's saying we want to deliver space to breathe. How do we do that?
Mm-hmm.
Um, what are the steps? What are the processes? How can we do it so that we're truly delivering that? So that becomes the standard. Um,
Why seven generations? I'm hearing endurance, I'm hearing longevity, and I know inherently that there's massive value in this, just the conceptual idea of seven generations for Cove. But what is it? Why seven? What's that about for you? What does it represent?
okay, so the quick answer is I don't know.
Okay.
But my birthday is on January 7th. And so
Okay.
seven is a good number. But I honestly believe that it's a First Nation approach to managing the environment.
Mm,
Um, and so the idea that it will continue beyond our ability to conceive in terms of the continuity and the succession. Like I can't imagine 7 generations from now.
Right.
So I guess it's the closest thing to forever or for 100 years or 200 years, with
Yeah.
the idea that our planning can't be focused on the short term.
Yeah,
The
exactly. And I
I
think, yeah,
exact
that's what I'm hearing, right? It's if you're thinking 7 generations out, you're certainly not thinking to the end of the week or
exactly
even
or the
to
quarter.
or the end of your own life, right?
Yes,
You're
exactly,
thinking well
exactly.
beyond that. And I would imagine that with that kind of thinking embedded inside Cove and your teams and your value proposition, how you create what you do. I cannot imagine that that doesn't impact how you design your engagements with clients.
Absolutely, and it's been very effective because when we talk to people about life insurance specifically,
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about planning that could go on for 30, 40, 50 years into the future. Well, it's not, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out I might not be around
Right.
when the product that they bought from me
Mm.
actually matures. So we talk about this in order to give people comfort that they're not going to be abandoned at some point, which comes back to we want to give them space, create space to breathe so that when they think about their insurance, they don't have that niggling little thought that what happens when I get old and Bernie's not around.
Mm-hmm.
That literally has driven us to figure out, okay, so we've got Bernie and my wife, Christy, who is a co-owner in Cove. We have the next generation represented by Warren Campbell, who's a owner of Cove. And then we have our daughter and our niece and her husband, who represents the third generation. So already we're kind of going, okay, we're on our way. We can do this. And
Right.
then there is the next generation, which could be Warren's kids as they come,
Mm-hmm.
um, as they grow up.
How does
So,
that feel for you as the founder starting Cove in 1990 and seeing where you are now?
well, I don't. I actually was just thinking about that recently, and the evolution of Cove has depersonalized it for me. It's
Mm.
no longer my baby. It's no,
Mm.
Cove is no longer just me. And so I have a great sense of satisfaction in knowing that I can actually move on out of Cove and I'm not
Mm.
letting anybody down. So
Mm.
that in turn creates a huge amount of space to breathe for me
I can hear that.
because because the families and the people that we work with face those same issues. What
Yeah.
happens when the founder passes away? What happens
Right.
when wealth transitions to the next generation? It creates a tremendous amount of stress. And what I've found is that a lot of people don't want to talk about it. They
Uh,
don't know how to talk about it. So this experiment, this 7 generation plan for Cove, is really a way for us to demonstrate that it's possible. Yet it's very self-serving in that it provides us with a path to walk on to allow us to develop space to breathe and to provide confidence to our clients that we walk our talk. And
mhm.
therefore, we are reliable resources to ask these questions of. How
Right.
do they create a 7 generation plan? How
Mhm.
do they create space to breathe in through their planning? And so it's like it's
Mhm.
self-perpetuating in
Mhm.
many ways.
Absolutely. And we can hear right from the beginning space to breathe, although that may not have been the expression that you used, but most of us will say, I just need some space to breathe. It's such a
Yes,
common
yes,
expression. So
yes,
it's threading through your whole story.
yes,
And everywhere you looked, it was about the space to breathe, to create the kind of access to happiness through the freedom that was available because there's no stress, et cetera, right? This
yes.
whole thread. Um, you made a comment really, really early on that I kind of wanted to come back to. You had a giggle about it. You said, "Yes, I've read Lord of the Rings." And I feel like that has some relevance somewhere in here. So I would love just to touch on that and find out, why did you bring that particular story up?
Well, Joseph Campbell, uh, spent a lot of time talking about the quest and
Mm,
what those stages of the quest were. And the most commonly known one is Lord of the Rings. Like
okay.
I read it back in the, 70s, um, when before it became a movie, and then a lot of people saw the movie, so they understand the concept of a quest.
Ah,
You strike out to discover the world, to find yourself, to challenge yourself, and then you come back with a different perspective, and
mhm.
then you spend your time trying to apply what you've learned into that world that you come back to. So I just use that because it is a common. A lot of people will relate to it, and um, I felt in retrospect that in many ways that's what I was doing. I was going out to challenge myself. I was going out to live so that nobody knew who I was. I was in a place where nobody knew where I was, where they didn't know me, and I would have to find my own sense of happiness and my own space to breathe with the limited resources I had, which
Mhm.
was a pack on my back, which was very small, some sandals, some shorts, and a t-shirt, and a tent and a sleeping bag. And that was it. And back then there was no internet. There were no cell phones. There was telegrams and very expensive long distance phone calls.
That's right, exactly. And money
So
belts.
and money belts and traveler's checks.
That's
Yes,
right.
that whole world. Not even credit cards. Like
No.
not for me anyway. Um, yeah. So when I think about my journey, um, in a very small way, I find that these stories capture, the spirit or the sense that I had that I was going off to conquer the world, or more like conquer my own fears, which
Mm,
is really what it was all about. And I'm just so happy that I was blessed with the opportunity to meet amazing people that truly did transform my life, and that I'm able to somehow bring that back into um, the regular world through our business
yeah.
and through our interactions with people.
Amazing. Yeah, speaking, you're speaking about, thank you for bringing back the word quest. I'm glad I asked because, yes, you were on a quest in your youth and it had a different objective. And then, of course, you started an entrepreneurial journey. That's an entirely new quest, right? A different type of quest, but it has the same parts of the journey in it
Oh yeah, yeah,
around conquering fears and whatnot.
yes. And we do it every day.
Uh-huh.
People say challenge yourself. Well, you don't really have to. You're challenged. Like
Yeah.
you don't have to go looking for the challenge. It's how we can face everyday and normal activities. And you know, that my the beginning of my conscious travels was many years ago. And I think back and I kind of go, okay, that was time well spent. How can I put that wisdom to use?
Mhm.
And how can I continue to learn? Because above all, your question about, how do I feel about Cove, you know, building this and being part of building it. The reality is that I see how it gains a life of its own, and it's no longer mine. And so to learn that that's okay, to
Mm,
learn that everything that we have, we don't have to grab onto it and think that this is who we are.
right.
I see it so often with business owners and family founders, entrepreneurs. When that it comes time to give up the reins,
Mm,
they're in a deep amount of stress. There's a tremendous sense of loss of identity,
mhm.
and I totally feel for them. And what I feel is a wish that they could find the skills to to learn how to be free of that, because is that how they want to, live the rest of their life with this idea of emptiness that I built all this, but I no longer control it. And it's no longer technically mine. And especially when we pass on, we're not taking it with us.
Mm-hmm.
So the
Mm-hmm.
idea of letting go,
Mm-hmm.
which is, a very valuable skill in
Mm-hmm.
itself,
Mm-hmm.
to be able to let go of those things at the right time so that we can maintain a sense of happiness with the path that we're on
Right.
versus constantly looking back and saying, that's the way it was. I remember back in the day. And I'm sure that we all know people who live very much in the past,
Mm.
and there's a lot more.
It's true, isn't it? You're really referencing something that's just been, again, a thread through your story. But as we, as you look, you're always looking forward, Bernie. I'm hearing that there's a journey behind you that's supporting you and forming part and informing who you are and who you're becoming. But you're not holding on to that as your identity. You're continuing to create your identity as you move forward and move into that future part of you. And so, I'm curious, do you feel like you're on a quest now, a different quest as you're preparing for Cove to move into 7 generations and getting ready for that change? That's
It's not a different quest, it's the same quest, and that is to find a lasting happiness, and to develop the skills of my mind, to be able to be skillful, to make
mm,
skillful decisions. And skillful decisions is responding to something that happens in my life in a way that doesn't create more pain and suffering for myself or others.
mhm,
So it's such a big thing, and
mhm,
I feel like um, that as I move through my life, as I age, I start to. So I digress a little bit here, but you're right. I used to do ultra trail running. I used to do races. I was never really good at it. I could keep up with the pack. I was, top third or something like that. But um, for me, the success of completing these activities was what I really loved, challenging myself, and also being out in the forest for hours at a time. But when I go and do that now, I see how much I've aged. I
oh,
see how my capabilities have
we
changed.
feel it differently, don't we?
Yes,
Sneaks up on
um,
us.
it does. And I could feel sad or disappointed about that, or
Mm,
I could acknowledge that that's just what happens. So how can I use my body and my mind now to be able to continue my journey without thinking that it's over? In other words, um, if I, heaven forbid, or let me rephrase that, if I have the unfortunate incident where I can't use my legs, um, I will figure out a way to use my mind
mm,
to be able to understand and rationalize that that's not who I am. And therefore, I will continue to learn and use my mind to look and develop that sense of happiness, which is not based on my ability to run through the forest
right.
or do all those other things. So I think that the inevitable is that, when we're on our deathbed, we're not going to be able to grab onto anything outside of ourselves in order to give ourselves comfort or to find peace. So what are we left with? We're left with our mind. And so the quest is to train that mind to be skillful, even in the very worst
Mm,
situations and conditions,
mhm. Yeah.
because that I want to be my legacy, to be able to grow old and to approach death, to have the people that are in my life look and be inspired that um, it's not something to fear. It's not something that is going to give them a huge amount of stress, which it will
Mm,
anyway. But
mhm,
the idea that there is a possibility to live and die differently.
mhm,
So I use that as the extreme, but every time we have an upset in our life, it's a little death that we have to
mhm,
adjust to.
mhm. So you've been in the death business for your entire lifetime.
I I I really believe that that's the
Death and
case.
disability, as they say.
Yes.
Well, I think, thank you that sharing all of this. You started with freedom to do what we want, leading to happiness, reduction of stress. And as you talk about the journey and essentially just using the tools that we have, our mind being our most powerful, using the tools that we have skillfully. And I really appreciate your drawing out this, what skillful means and how we can train and practice to that as we're on our quest, challenging ourselves to grow and become who we will become in the future, in alignment with what you've really highlighted, over the overarching, I just want to acknowledge this, the overarching thing that I've heard throughout this whole thing is really love and care for others, just wanting others to not experience pain and suffering. And your way of supporting them through that journey is through offering space to breathe. And your tool is life insurance.
Yes.
Does that resonate?
Yes.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
beautiful. Doing insurance the right way. So, Bernie, I have a question for you. As you're thinking about your career and thinking about the clients that you've helped and created space to breathe, is there a particular story that might stand out for you as one that is especially rewarding?
Yes, and I was just thinking about it earlier today, and in fact, I was talking about it, and I was talking about it because we had just come to see a family, and we're doing continuity planning for the family, and we were asking the question of, you know, how are you going to handle, um, you know, the continuity of shares if one of your children dies and the shares are to go to the spouse? What do you want to, how do you want that to look? And uh, immediately in my mind, I remember a story about one of our clients um, whose husband had a very unfortunate situation, and he passed away. There was life insurance in place, and it was enough life insurance to allow the spouse to be completely financial independent from the financial affairs of a very large family enterprise.
Mm,
Um, because they did not have a good continuity plan in place because of their inability to execute. And what I mean by that is that we had drafted all of the continuity documents, but there was a tremendous reluctance to sign it. And I could go into all the reasons
mm,
why, but the reality is that the life insurance was put into place in any event, but it just meant that that life insurance was going to provide for the surviving spouse and didn't have anything to do with the business.
mm,
And it
mhm,
was enough capital to allow her and her kids to live independently for the rest of their lives. And the impact that that had was phenomenal in the sense that her appreciation for being not having to get involved in a very messy, complicated family business dynamic was so powerful for her that she was so appreciative because she had to deal with her kids, her young children, dealing with the death of their father. And the idea that she would have to deal with the financial complications related to the family business was overwhelming for her while he was alive, let alone if she was dependent on them in the event of his death.
mhm.
And so to me, that was the ultimate story of creating space to breathe.
I was just thinking the same thing. Because ultimately, space to breathe is about removing stress. And
Yes.
it could not have been more perfectly, more skillfully executed
Yeah, and
in creating that.
the reason why I can express that and with the reason why I say that that happened is because she expressed it to me multiple times about how important this was to her. It's not that I look at it and I judge that. It's the feedback that we got, and that has motivated me significantly. And it's actually motivated me to push people to make very difficult decisions with confidence that it actually works. It
Mm-hmm.
actually does provide um, what they're looking for, even if they're reluctant in implementing. And I think that's a unique skill or strength that we have as a group,
Mm,
that we have the firm belief that what we do helps people.
absolutely. Well, when you
Yeah.
get that kind of feedback, and you know that your work has such a profound impact on people, it's incredibly rewarding to know that you've transformed lives and made a
Hmm.
meaningful difference, right? Around real and meaningful and important topics.
Yes.
That's beautiful, Bernie. Is there a piece of wisdom around space to breathe, around this idea that you might like to share before we finish up?
So creating space to breathe is contingent on doing it in an ethical and upstanding way. So financial freedom it does not necessarily create space to breathe. It's how we create that financial freedom. So when we think about space to breathe, what can we do? What are the decisions? What are the skillful decisions
Mm,
that we can make that are truly skillful in the sense that they don't harm anybody, they don't harm somebody else, they don't harm ourselves, that actually provide us with a sense of relief, lowers our
mm,
stress, and allows us an opportunity to continue with a clear conscience. So to
mhm,
me, the combination of space to breathe and a deep commitment to doing it the right way are the two things that go together that I think will be help a person be successful in no matter what they do.
mhm,
No compromise.
mhm.
Don't leave any stones unturned.
Exactly. And the right way is really wrapped up in ethical and ethical practices that allow us to look in the mirror and like who we see, so to speak, right?
Skillful practices
There you go.
that
Skillful
don't cause yourself or other people harm.
other people
Yes.
harm. Beautiful. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much. Bernie, for those who are more interested in finding out more about you and learning about Cove and the beautiful work you do, where might they find you?
They'll find us at our website at Cove Continuity, or sorry, coveadvisors.com. Everything about us is on that website, and they
Mm,
can always feel free to reach out. Be happy to tell our story, and there's a few young people in our company
mm.
that would love to tell the story as well.
A few generations.
A few generations, yes, and we have at least four more to go.
There you go. Well, it has been an absolute delight. And thank you so much for sharing your story and helping us understand a little bit more about having space to breathe and how to create that. Thank you, Bernie.
You're very welcome, Michelle. Thank you for the opportunity.
Been a delight. See you next time. Bye for now.